is your favorite and least favorite wrestling reporter?
Sap's gonna get mad here in this one.
What's up, YouTube? Welcome to Muscle Memory. My name is Malcolm, and today we have one of the biggest wrestling interviewers in the entire world. You can catch him on WWE on Fox. It's Out of Character podcast. It's Ryan Satin. What's up, man?
What up? Glad to be here, dude. I'm a fan of your work since following you the past, I guess, couple months now? 2 months? Something like that, almost?
Months.
Yeah,
man. Like, it was insane. Like, when I ran into you, it was at a GCW show. It was at Nashville during like SummerSlam weekend. And like, I'm recording stuff from my blog, trying to get like different angles of like the arena, just so like it was like the stagnant like shot of like, here's Moxley walking out, here's Jordan Oliver, etc. And I kind of look over him like, he looks familiar, but I don't know where I've seen him. But I know that face, and I hear you talk. I'm like, yeah, that's Ryan Satin. What the? What? Okay, let me go say hi real quick. But like, you were so nice and like gave me like so much advice and whatnot, and I really appreciate it. And it's great to have you on, man. And like, we were talking before we started recording about different podcasts and how you're a big podcast guy. Obviously, you have your own. What's like a podcast you've been listening to recently that's like outside of just wrestling?
Outside of wrestling, easy. My favorite podcast is This Is Important. It's the podcast done by the Workaholics guys. And honestly, a lot of people don't even know the Workaholics guys have a podcast, but I was a huge fan of Workaholics when it was on TV. Yeah. And I've been sad since it was off the air. I know they're working on a movie and they've got other stuff going on, but This Is Important is by far my favorite podcast. I'm so invested in it. It's just the three of them, Durs, Adam, and Blake. Four of them and Kyle, talking about random stuff, you know, just like a life, their own lives, whatever, but it's so entertaining. And then as far as like interviews go, I listen to the Conan O'Brien podcast, the Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend podcast, Mark Maron, WTF, and another one called Happy, Sad, Confused, which is like actors being interviewed, just because I feel like I get kind of like all kinds of interviewing styles in one there, because when I listen to podcasts, I'm really trying to like also gain something from it, like as if I'm studying the interviewers. And so I try to get something from all of the above.
For sure, man. The one I listen to a lot, it's like, I mean, a lot of people don't like him, but it's like Impulsive Logan Paul. Like, I mean, some people dislike him, but the guy's entertaining. His whole crew's entertaining. It's just like, it's always a good 45-hour watch, or maybe listen if you're like going somewhere. I usually try to listen to it right into the gym. But I have like one big question to kind of like set the tone of this interview. And it could be a little deep. I'm not too sure exactly, but I know it's recently with Logan Paul and Roman Reigns, they had a press conference over like their world title match coming up next month at Crown Jewel. And there was a lot of different press there, especially that was really like fighting and boxing centric. And a lot of them got to interview Roman and Logan after the show, but like, you don't really see that too often with like wrestling media showing up at these press conferences. Here and there, we get a couple guys, but not all the time and consistently. Do you feel like the WWE just doesn't like the wrestling media landscape? And if so, how has wrestling media learned to like change that narrative and have a healthy relationship with the company?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's really hard to compare the current mindset versus the former mindset, because they are drastically different, I think, in my opinion. You know, I think that if you're looking at the old era of things and the way it was done before, I think the way they looked at it was the wrestling media is going to cover wrestling whether we invite them or not. Yeah. So we don't really have to invite them, I think. And so if you look at it in terms of like, if you're a PR person and you're trying to get as much media coverage as possible, and let's say you only have X amount of spots, you're going to invite the people who are, you know, part of actual publication, you know, not something that's just a wrestling publication. Because you, from a PR perspective, you want to get it on all the major publications, you know, and like I said, all the wrestling sites are going to cover it anyways, no matter what. And I do think that the current regime has a much different relationship with the wrestling media. When Triple H was in charge of NXT, he had regular calls with the media, good relationship with all of them, invites to the Performance Center, where you could, you know, I got to go to the Performance Center for the NXT, the first time NXT was going to be on TV, did a tour of the place, got to learn how it ran. You know, he remembered people's names, you know, like he'd say, hey, thanks for this or that. He talked to them like he wanted them to cover what he was doing. I think it was different, not because he needed it or whatever, but I think that Triple H is a wrestling fan, ultimately at the end of the day, like he has a different view of things than someone who has been at the top of the industry and in a way molded the entire industry for decades. I think he just has a different view of things. And so former regime with me, I think I was always a little different. I started at a major publication and helped them when it came to pro wrestling. Like I helped, not to like pat myself on the back.
No, go ahead.
Anything, but like
okay.
You wouldn't see wrestling coverage on TMZ if I hadn't have been there. You
Facts.
wouldn't have seen the story about Andrade and Sammy Guevara fighting if I had never been at TMZ, because before me at TMZ, they were like, we don't want to cover wrestling. Like when I started pitching wrestling stories, they were like, hey, can you pitch something else? And so I think that, because of that, I've always had a different relationship with them because I did, handle things differently. Like I didn't start just as a wrestling news guy. And honestly, when I started my website, I had to regain that trust in them. Like I absolutely was like feeling myself like, oh, I got this great relationship, and then instantly back to the bottom, So it was like, I'm back, with all the rest of the wrestling media being left out of things. And I had to work my way back into being invited to getting on WWE Backstage, to getting the position I have now. And so, I think that, yes, there is there things could be better, but I do see a huge difference in just the past few months. Like the fact that they had that press conference, that's pretty cool. Like they aren't doing that normally with like anything with WWE usually. So I like it. I think, but I do think that, of course there could be improvements made. Absolutely. I think that, like, I hate to say this because it's giving me competition, but they should give more interviews to the wrestling media. Like they shouldn't ice the wrestling media out of things. Like I think they're fans at the end of the day. And I think that you want fans who are watching your product to be energized by it. I mean, like, just look at this White Rabbit stuff. People are energized by it. They're excited, and it's interactive. And so you want the fan base to be energized like that rather than feel like they're being forgotten.
For sure. And like you definitely have like paved the way from like TMZ and covering all the wrestling media and whatnot and like wrestling stories and breaking it there. What do you feel like has been like your biggest, and also Pro Wrestling Sheet as well, but what do you feel like has been like your biggest like story that you've broken so far in your entire career of like working in like the realm of wrestling?
That's tough.
I know there's a lot. I know you got a lot.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, trying to think of like, unfortunately, it's always like negative ones, it's typically like when people pass away or something like that, so I it's hard to like think at it in terms of like the ones that aren't like that, but I think maybe like, I don't know, dude, that's a tough question. Cause I mean, when I did my website, it was like 5 years of just breaking big stories day after day. Which I don't miss at all because it's so stressful having to do that. And it's not fun. Like, you see Sean Ross Sapp arguing with people all day long on social media. And I get it because I was that guy before. And it's like, it's just not a fun place to be. So I don't know, to answer, I'm changing the subject. I'm sorry.
Maybe like the top like 5 you can think of. There's like too many. Pick like a couple then. So I know, I get it. You out there, you famous.
I mean, a lot of them, like the one that comes to mind for me, I guess, was probably like when Brock Lesnar threw the title at Vince when he was mad. He came backstage and he threw the title at Vince, and it got picked up everywhere that he got in this like altercation with Vince backstage. And then everybody told me it wasn't true. Everyone said it didn't happen. It was like this whole thing. And then a year later, they put out a documentary and they show the footage of Brock being like, here's your effing title, and throwing it at Vince. That was a big one for me, only because it was real vindication in some way. I think sadly, like the biggest thing has been Sasha and Bailey. And like, I didn't even put that on my website. It was a stupid tweet that I regret. So like, I don't know, like the one I hate to, honestly, I don't like to answer because all the ones that come to mind are all negative. Like they're not positive. It's why I got out of the news business. Like I just didn't enjoy the negativity. Like I unfortunately like there's not, I wish there was one that was like, so-and-so did a good deed. You know, I mean, there are those, but they're not the biggest ones. Like the ones I like the most are when people did something cool, you know, like,
yeah, sure.
You know, or when someone, you know, it was mainly when someone did something cool, like Shad stopping a burglar when I was at TMZ, you know, stopping a burglar at a gas station and hitting me up and telling me about it. And me being like, Shad Gaspard, and telling me like, you'll never guess what happened, you know, and I'll be, and me being like, that didn't happen. Like, no way, that didn't happen, you know? And he's like, call the place, get the security footage. I'm like, fine, I will. And like, I call the place and they're like, yeah, it happened. Here's the security footage. And you're just like, whoa, what the hell? You know, or I think it was Sean Davari too, who also like stopped someone on a bus or something like that and ended up getting the footage. But yeah, unfortunately, like they're all the biggest ones are all deaths and sad things, and I'd rather not relive those because they're all depressing.
Yeah, we definitely don't have to. And
yeah, they won't be fun stories, I promise.
So do you feel like now doing interviews instead of like breaking news? Like, what's the transition been like for you? And then like it seems like you like it a lot more. So like, why do you like doing interviews more than maybe breaking news?
I mean, breaking news just sucks, dude. Like, honestly, at the end of the day, like you're revealing people's secret. Like, if you're good at what you're doing, if you're a good reporter, you're revealing things that people don't want known usually. And after 10 years of doing it, like, you know, I didn't just do it with wrestling at TMZ. I was breaking some of the biggest stories in entertainment on a constant basis. Then I was like, well, that's really taxing on me. Maybe I'll just talk about wrestling. I really like wrestling. Maybe I'll try to bring legitimacy to wrestling news. I did that for a while, and then that weighed on me. And I was like, maybe it's just news I don't like. Like, you know, I didn't really like news before. I just kind of did it because I was good at it. And so when I tried, you know, I pursued Fox. And I think the thing I like more about interviewing people is the reason I'm a good reporter, investigative journalism, whatever you want to call it. And I also feel like I'm good at what I do now is because ultimately I'm attracted to just truths and stories, you know, like interesting stories and truths. And you get both of those things out of interviewing and out of being a reporter, you know, except one is the person the person you're interviewing is okay with this information being out rather than people who aren't and are mad that you're putting this information out about them, you know? And so I like getting interesting stories from people. I genuinely do. Like when I started doing the podcast, at first my like, you know, we do these 20-minute interviews or whatever, you know, and I sometimes felt like there was uncharted like I'd get to a topic and I'd have to stop. I'd have to move on because it was like, well, we're in this interesting conversation, but I got to move on because I only got 20 minutes. Yeah. And so now I can kind of just like explore, talk about random stuff, find out people's interesting sides. You know, I purposely don't go for like, you know, the top people every single time because I think everybody has an interesting story. And so the thing I really enjoy is talking to people and finding out who they are as people. Like, I don't know these people. A lot of these people, I've never talked to them before. My first time talking to them. And I just want to find out who they are as people, as if we were out going to dinner or something. And I have more fun doing that than revealing people's secrets.
Have you had like a favorite interview so far since starting this podcast?
Well, I mean, like, yes, there's like The Undertaker, there's Paul Heyman, which of course, like, I don't even have to explain why I would list those two. You know, there's Cody, because it was just such a trip for both of us to be talking on Fox, him in WWE, me working for Fox Sports when we had been in a much different place a couple of years before, the two of us having an interview then. And it was just like a really cool, like, full circle. I don't know if full circle is the right term, but just like a really cool progression of where we both were. I really enjoyed that. But I also really enjoy the stories that people haven't heard before. So in terms of like one like interview that didn't get as much attention, that to me was the most fascinating interview I had done, was Reggie, who, you know, 24/7 champ Reggie. Yeah. Well, not currently, former. Dude, like, his story is insane. Like, he used he was like a crip at like as a child, you know, like, and was like raised by a gang and like had like a family member killed in front of him in his house, and then realized he had to get out of this life. And he used the circus of all things to get out of it. And so that's why he's all good at flips and doing everything. Because like he was like, you know what, I'm going to do circus. And then he took circus and got into Cirque du Soleil and got into into the school that teaches everyone who gets into Cirque du Soleil, had to teach himself French in order to get into that school. This kid's like from a gang in Detroit and like taught himself French to get into the circus. And then it led to WWE. And it was just such a crazy story that to me, that was the most interesting interview, just because it was like, I didn't even talk at all in it. I was just like listening to him like, damn, this is crazy. Your life has been crazy.
Wow. Like that's something like that's like stuff that people don't even like think about. Like looking at some of the roster, like I wouldn't have expected looking at Reggie, who like gets beat up by like Carmella or Dana Brooke or something, to like come from that kind of background. That's wild. I don't even think I watched that interview, so I'm gonna go back and watch that now, because now
it was an earlier show. And I was very hungover while doing it, unfortunately, but because it was the day after my birthday, if I recall correctly. And I even got on like, hey man, I'm not as energetic as usually. I apologize. And he was like, oh, it's totally all good. And then I didn't even have to talk the whole interview. It was great. You can't tell I'm hungover or anything, because he's so entertaining in it that I'm just sitting there like, dude, your life, man, this should be a movie. Like, this is crazy, man. Like, it's crazy.
That's insane, man. Like, what do you think is like the mainstream opinion on like wrestling now versus like what it used to be? Because obviously, like before, like yourself and like others breaking this stuff into like bigger mainstream platforms, wrestling kind of wasn't covered that often, unless it was like, again, something sad like a passing or whatnot. Compared to now, where like now it's like a lot more is being reported in TMZ, and we'll talk about some of that stuff in a little bit. But like, what's your thoughts on the mainstream's opinion versus now professional wrestling?
I think that, when I started at TMZ, that was definitely the thought process across the internet was like, we're not talking about wrestling unless someone dies, like, or gets arrested, and then we can like look down on wrestling, and when I started at TMZ, I wanted to do the opposite of that. I was like, I want to mix this up a little bit. Like, I want to like blend things and have a bunch of positive stories, fun stories. Like, wrestlers are freaking famous, dude. Like, you guys might not realize it, but they've got like millions of followers. Like, it's the only TV show that's on 24/7, like it's always on. It's got this huge fan base. And I'm not taking credit for it, but I do think that in that era, there were a lot of people like myself who were wrestling fans at different places, whether it be in TV or wherever, that helped change the opinion a little bit to some degree, because I think that also, and at the same time, websites went from being like a topic, like entertainment news or this or that, to being like, okay, we need to get as many clicks as possible. So we're going to talk about we're going to post whatever. Like, we'll hire someone else just to write this. We'll hire someone else just to write that. And so when people started to write a few things about wrestling that weren't just deaths based on stories I had maybe done or in entertainment or elsewhere, I think they all started to see that like, oh, there's 100 wrestling websites. And anytime we write anything about them, these wrestling fans are going to pick it apart to ad nauseum. They're all going to read it. They're all going to click it. Like, even if they hate it, they're going to click it just to hate on it. And so I think a lot of these sites started to see how much traffic wrestling content gets. So because of that, I do think that the relationship, the view of the media, the view of wrestling amongst the mainstream audience has changed a little bit and is less arm's distance, because they see that there is a big audience for it and they want those clicks at the end of the day.
For sure. And like looking like TMZ, for example, they just covered that Andrade Sammy Guevara had the big like pull apart fight backstage AEW. I was just at Dynamite last night, so the whole crowd was insane chanting for that. Like, what do you think like TMZ or mainstream considers like interesting wrestling news versus like not interesting wrestling news?
Definitely fights are considered interesting. That's for sure. I would say fights and negativity, where there's some sort of negativity, is always going to play on the internet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that and if it's positive, it probably will get overlooked, because unfortunately people don't click those stories as much.
Dang, you hate to see it. And like, I guess like
it's true though. Like, no one like, I used to run a website. Like, I ran my own website for 5 years. Like, I saw the clicks to everything, and it's not like I fed into that, because I had columns that I'd go up where I posted positive stuff. I posted fun stuff. I posted a lot of it. I was the one writing the majority of the content every day. Didn't get as much traffic as the negative stuff, and they see that. Like, and I care, so I want there to be a healthy balance. Like, I don't want just to have this thing where I'm just like crapping on wrestling all day. I want to like share positive things people like, things that are going to make people laugh. But unfortunately, like, to a lot of these people, it's a business, you know, and you need to pay the bills somehow. So you're going to do the thing that's getting the most people talking, which is negativity.
Well, I mean, at least you had like your website, and you had like the opportunity to put out those kind of positive stories. And like, what was like your biggest, like when you made that website and like you were posting to it and whatnot, what was the biggest like trial and error when you started the site being like a reporter, that now like looking back at it, you're like, all right, I'm glad I kind of had these little moments, because I'm way better now than I would have been.
I mean, it was there was one story I did that I've always felt bad about, where, you know, I was so stuck in the TMZ mindset of someone did something bad, I should report on it, you know? And I, you know, people don't realize this, but a lot of stuff like mugshots, you know, court cases, you can literally just pull up a couple websites and just look. Like, it's literally like a Google, you know, where you just type someone's name in Florida and you see what comes up, you know? And when I first started the site, I was just looking for stories, and I did a story on someone who had gotten a DUI, but they had gotten the DUI a year before, and they had gone through everything. They had finished, you know, they'd done all the court stuff. They'd done it all. They were out of, they had handled what they needed to do. And I saw DUI for this wrestler, and I was like, well, that's a story. And I just, you know, I just did it. And I even reached out to like WWE for comment, but I don't think they told the wrestler that I did that. So then this wrestler got blindsided with me posting their year-old DUI, and a lot of people were unhappy about it. And I definitely was like, you know what? Like, this isn't what I want my website to be. Like, I don't have a boss anymore. Like, there's no one telling me to do stuff. Like, I can literally post whatever I want on this website. Like, I don't have to post a year-old DUI. I can do something that's more positive or fun or whatever. So I stopped like digging into like old stuff. I stopped digging into old stuff on the site. But really, I mean, yeah, I mean, that was a big one. And early on, and also, like, I shouldn't have, the biggest lesson I learned was I shouldn't have talked crap about people who pay for wrestling news. Like, when I launched the site, I was like, put my foot down. Like I will not charge for wrestling news. I think it's stupid that people charge for wrestling news. You can make that money back in ads on the website. You know, like, you can do it in different ways. I want there to be transparency in my news. I don't want it to be hidden behind a paywall. I want everyone to see it so that everyone can talk about it, because for so long I had seen stuff behind a paywall get misconstrued, you know, quoted incorrectly, and it always drove me crazy as a wrestling fan. So I wanted to give someone the opposite, because all the main voices were all behind a paywall, and it always drove me crazy. I grew up without a lot of money. You know, people think I like grew up rich or something, but like, I grew up without a lot of money. I didn't have money to pay for any of these things. I didn't even know who Dave Meltzer was until I was an adult. You know, I'd watched wrestling my entire childhood, even though I went on wrestling sites every day, you know, like, so but then I think ultimately I was wrong. Like, you know, Fightful is proof of that. Like, you know, like, if I hadn't come out with that model of being like, wrestling news, don't pay for wrestling news, you know, like, and I had just come out and charged for my stuff like Fightful, like, I'd probably be a lot more. I make good money, so I'm not unhappy with my money, but like, things would probably be differently. Would have been different. I would have probably still been, you know, would have been a lot different. And so that's really like the big lesson is I shouldn't have focused on others when I was doing my site. I should have just said, hey, you're going to get good stuff from me. I don't care what else you do, what other kind of coverage you get. That's really what I wish I had done. I wish I hadn't focused on anyone else. I wish I hadn't have gone at Dave Meltzer and Mike Johnson. It's less about the reporting, because my reporting is solid. Like, I could step back in right now and be a great reporter. I was a great reporter when I left. You know, I broke some of the biggest stories in TMZ history. I was a manager on the website. You know, I was really good at my job. I it was other things that I wasn't as good at that I wish I had more maturity factor. I wish I had not gone at everybody so hard. I had a chip on my shoulder and I shouldn't have.
So you mentioned that you were really big into like looking at wrestling news when you were younger growing up. So like, did you ever have that aspiration of like wanting to like be a wrestler? Or you're kind of just like, all right, wrestling, journalism, media, maybe that's the path for me.
Yeah, no, I'm not buff like you. So no, never wanted to be a wrestler. I actually wanted to work behind the scenes in wrestling. Like I always wanted to work behind the scenes in wrestling. Didn't happen. After I left TMZ, I kind of tried a little bit, like, no, maybe I'll try, but didn't work out. Yeah. And I really wanted to work in wrestling in some way. So like not in wrestling, I guess, but I wanted to talk about wrestling all the time. I wanted to like that to be my life, and so that's why I went into the wrestling news realm. I was trying to work behind the scenes. Like I worked in TV. My dad's a TV producer. I worked in TV like my whole life as a kid, just for, I shouldn't say my whole life, but like in summers, I would go work with my dad in TV. I grew up around TV. I really like TV. Like TV is something that has always kind of been there for me. Like I'm a big TV person. Some people are movies, like sports. For me, it's just been TV. And wrestling was just always like the show that captivated me the most, and it never went away. Like every other show had an off season, summer it wasn't on TV or whatever, and wrestling just always was on, and it was fun. Like you get a little bit of everything there. That you get a little bit of sports, like action, you get entertainment, you get serious stuff, you get funny stuff. It's just like all across the board, and so I really focused on that, but from day one, I was behind the scenes. Like my dad worked in TV, and he worked on a show called Rhonda Shear Up All Night. And the first show that I went to was it was in LA, and it was prior to WrestleMania, and I got to be backstage, and I got to see Undertaker and Yokozuna talking to each other. They're in a feud, and they're homies playing cards together in the locker room. I'm in the Gorilla, which I didn't even know what Gorilla was then, and I'm standing there, and I see Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna, and they come up to me and my brother, and they're scary, and they come up and they're the nicest two people. They come up and they're just like, hey, are you guys having a good time? You enjoying the show? Like, have you been to this before? Blah, 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 blah. Music hits, and they go like, oh, well, enjoy the rest of the night. It was really nice to meet you. And I keep looking at that camera when I'm on this camera now. Really nice to meet you. Like great meeting you. Music hits. And they turn around and she kicks the door in, and they're like, "Bleh!" And he's like, oh, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, what am I doing? I remember walking that night, seeing Men on a Mission, and they're like, they see little kids in the locker room and they instantly snap into character and are like growling at us. And I'm like, this is crazy. And so I always really had a fascination with behind the scenes more than even on camera. And I love the stuff that I watch on camera, but I had that. And then also when I like first got into it, like hardcore in the Attitude Era, my dad took me to see a early screening of Beyond the Mat. And I just went like, this is so crazy. Like these people are so interesting. The people, not even the characters, like these people are interesting, like they're fascinating to me. And so it really was like the behind the scenes that really always hooked me, which is why I probably did what I did and do what I do. So yeah, as much as I love wrestling and the art of wrestling, the wrestling business has always kind of fascinated me even more.
Were you ever someone that like wanted to start their own promotion? Like, was Ryan Satin wrestling ever going to be a thing?
I don't have that kind of money. I wish. I worked for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood briefly, for really just like purely for fun, because I wasn't getting paid a lot, and I genuinely just, like I said, I kind of wanted to work behind the scenes in WWE growing up. And so when I started working at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, I was kind of like doing things here and there. And then they were like, well, do you want to produce all the promos? I was like, yeah, I want to produce all the promos. That sounds like so much fun. And so I had a whole summer where I worked behind the scenes at a wrestling promotion and produced all their on-screen promos. I wrote some of them or suggested things to people, got to work with like fairly well-known names. And It was awesome. You know, I just it was only like a summer, but it was really fun. And, you know, championship wrestling from Hollywood is like, people don't really give it enough credit, but it's on TV every week. Like, it's been going for years. Like, it kind of is like a little bit under the radar. I don't think it's, I forget if it's going on right now. I think it still is, but it was on TV for a long time. So, you know, it was fun, dude. Like that was that's probably the closest I'll ever get to it. You know, that and being backstage at a WWE show once.
Did you ever have like a favorite, like, since you are an interviewer, have you ever had like favorite like broadcaster? Like, was Jim Ross or Jerry Lawler like a favorite like commentator, or I don't know, Caleb Braxton backstage interviewer?
I mean, yeah, definitely Jim Ross. I mean, I grew up an Attitude Era kid. So, I mean, like, Jim Ross was the man for me. I loved Jim Ross. I also really like Michael Cole. Like, I don't think Michael Cole gets enough credit. You know, I think that, like, dude, Michael Cole is like a news broadcaster that went into the world of wrestling, and he's maintained this long. And I think that for a long time, he got so much crap from fans. And it wasn't until the past couple of years where he's really kind of gotten his flowers to some degree. But yeah, Michael Cole and Jim Ross for sure. I mean, they're both like legends. And I think another one, you know, even though it's more recent, would be Renee. Like Renee Paquette. Like, I really, you know, I'd see her and I'd be like, man, like, I would love to do something like that. She's getting to have fun while covering wrestling under the umbrella there, but she was doing so much cool stuff when she was in WWE, talking smack, you know, her own show, the backstage interviews. You know, she was really doing a lot. And yeah, definitely someone else who was an inspiration for sure, even though I was already older at that point.
Yeah, of course. And like, as we slowly get to like the end of the interview, Ryan, I want to play a game called Muscle Memory. So it's all hot takes. So I have a few questions for you. And like, if you don't want to answer, you don't even have to, but we'll go ahead and jump into it. So first one, really easy, softball. Who do you think is the White Rabbit?
Bray Wyatt.
Okay. I was about to say, like, there's only one answer here. I feel like it's someone else. Like, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense to be anybody else. I also think that if it wasn't Bray Wyatt, I feel like he would have said something by now. Yeah. Like, because everyone assumes it's him, I feel like he would have said something like, not now, my fireflies, or some weird cryptic thing, you know, but he hasn't said anything. And so, but I also think it's beyond that. I think it's going to be Bray Wyatt with a new Wyatt family, not by name, but I think it's going to be like some kind of White Rabbit family thing. And like, it's a bunch of people and not just him. I think it's going to be a bigger surprise than we're even expecting personally.
Oh, for sure.
I'm going to be at my sister's wedding, which is going to suck. Not her wedding. It's going to suck that I'm missing the reveal.
Of course.
Sorry,
a lot of people are saying like, oh, it could be Joe Gacy or Karrion Kross. I'm like, those are cool. I just feel like we're going to be really disappointed if it's not Bray. Like, if it's not him, whoever it could be, they did a good job, but people are just going to hate it because he's not Bray Wyatt. So hopefully it ends up being him at Extreme Rules. So we'll see when we get there. But next,
I can see Joe Gacy being involved still, though, like, and Karrion Kross. Like I was saying, a bunch of people, like, I could theoretically see all those guys being involved. And that's why there have been teases of them as well. For sure.
Like, there was like something about Lone Wolf at one point, and then kind of Joe Gacy's character kind of just fits in that realm of what Bray Wyatt does. So it definitely could be them. So we'll see. But getting to the next question, what wrestling match have you seen that made you like just personally mad? Like, was it because of the storyline, because of the booking? What wrestling match you're like, you know what? I hate it here.
Easy. So easy. I have two. Okay. One's going to be more popular than the other. The first one, since we were talking about Bray Wyatt, the one that just made me so mad was when Goldberg beat him for the title. I was just furious. Huge Fiend fan, and it was infuriating. I think most people agree with that one. They think it was pretty dumb to do that. But my actual one, that's a little more of a hot take, is further back in time. It's Undertaker beating Jeff Hardy in that ladder match back in the day. A lot of people. A lot of people will go like, oh, it made Jeff Hardy, or like, oh, it was like the thing that made Jeff. No, F that. It was not the thing that made Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy was already popping at that point in time. And if he had won the match, he could have been even more popping at that point in time. I remember at the time, I was a child, teenager, and I was a huge Hardy Boys mark. Love the Hardy Boys. Still am. Huge Hardy Boys fan. And I was, and specifically at that time, like, Jeff Hardy was my guy. Jeff Hardy was my guy. same birthday. I'm a fan. You got the whole look. Big fan. And at the time, I remember having this feeling. I was one of all of you at the time. Like I am a hardcore wrestling fan, and I was just like a young kid, really caught up in it. And I remember at that time, I really wanted new people to get put over. I really wanted new stars. I felt like the Attitude Era was coming to an end. WCW had been purchased. It was time to move into the next generation and get new stars over. And I was getting frustrated in the product. And so when Jeff Hardy lost that match, I was like, nope, I'm done. And I stopped watching. I was like, I'm done. A lot of people, a lot of them like, don't watch if you're pissed off. Don't watch if you don't like what they're doing. And people go, oh, what? No, I did it. I stopped watching. I was like, nope. I still read the results. Don't get me wrong. I read the results on the computer still.
Yeah.
But for a couple of years, dude, like maybe I would say like at least a year, a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I wasn't watching. I was pissed, dude. I was like, they're not making new stars, bleh, And then I finally like got back into it. My dad was gonna take me to an event, and I was like, I'm gonna watch. If I'm gonna go to this event, I gotta watch it to get up to date. And there was all these new people and new stars, and I was like, okay, all right, new stars. I'll come back. And it wasn't until years later, when Twitter and everything, social media became more prevalent, that I'd see everybody praising this match. And I was like, what the hell are you guys on? This match was terrible. Like, this match was infuriating. I even told Jeff Hardy this on my show, and he didn't really care. But I did tell him how mad I was about it. But he's also talks highly of it. So it was tough to kind of be like, well, I know you liked the match, but I hated it. And I was right as a child.
Like, that great moment he had? It sucked. And these are the reasons why.
It sucked, Jeff. It sucked. I hated it, Jeff.
Dude, one of my top matches that always makes me angry watching it. It's like, it had to do with Jeff Hardy too. It was him and Punk inside that steel cage. Jeff left WWE after, and I'm like 9 watching. I'm like, yo, screw this Punk guy. I hate him. Like, how could he do that to Jeff? But, the Jeff Hardy, everyone loves him. He's pretty much everyone's top 10, if not top 3, if not top 1. But I guess, one of my last 2 questions of these hot takes are, what's one big pet peeve about wrestling media that you have?
Not triple sourcing, double sourcing things, taking one person's side and running with it. Yeah. When I was at TMZ and on my own site, I really tried hard to triple source things because it's so easy to work people. Like, it's so easy, dude. And I think that like there just needs to be more sourcing that goes on with stories, and also like better questions at these like scrums and calls. Like, I'll sit there and I'll just hear things and I'm just like, this is what you asked? Like, this is what you asked. You flew out to Chicago. You're there in front of the people. And that's what you asked? Like, what was the point of you going there? Why don't you stay home?
What's your least favorite interview question? Like, what's the worst interview question you hear?
It's who's your Mount Rushmore of anything?
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Who's your Mount Rushmore? Shut up. Do more research. Who's your Mount Rushmore? Come on. Like, it's the stupidest question because most people have the same answer. Like, because they go, well, what's it based on? Is it based on who drew the most? My favorite? The best? Like, and it's the same conversation with every single person who gets to ask that question. And I'm just like, just go do go look at their Instagram. Just scroll through their Instagram and find one more interesting thing that they talk about on there than who's your Mount Rushmore? Who's your Mount Rushmore? If I could erase that question from every wrestling interviewer's notes, I would. I whenever I see it in a headline, I cringe.
Ryan said,
whoever did that is a bad interviewer.
Ryan, who's your Mount Rushmore?
Someone said that to me last night or this week. They were like, because I've said it on Twitter before about it, and I asked for icebreaker questions, and someone said, what's your Mount Rushmore of people who ask Mount Rushmore questions? And I was like, oh, you son of a bitch. You son of a bitch.
So I'm guessing Jeff Hardy's on that one. We'll just put Jeff Hardy 4 times, and that's the number. All right, cool.
Well, it depends. Are we talking about who draws better? My favorite? You know?
I mean, Dexter Lumis knows how to draw technically. Like, I mean, like by that note, it's just Dexter Lumis 3 times or 4 times over. So you never know.
Yes.
But I guess like my last like hot take question outside of your least favorite question in the world is who is your favorite and least favorite wrestling reporter?
You
can't say yourself for either.
Let's see. My favorite wrestling reporter would probably be I think my favorite wrestling reporter Sap's gonna get mad here in this one, but like personally, like I if I'm like seeking out someone's written work, it's typically John Pollock from Post Wrestling. I've always really liked the stuff that he writes and does, and I listen to his audio because I do feel like when I listen to their podcasts or their audio work, I typically tend to agree with John for the most part. And if I need like a second opinion in my mind of like, can someone please validate what I'm thinking here in my mind? I'm not tweeting about this. I'll go and listen to like, you know, him and Way to see if like I agree. Least favorite reporter. I mean, probably like, I guess like Brad Shepard, I guess if he even counts, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't consider him a reporter. You know, so I get if he's considered, I'll put him there. Like, I guess, I don't know.
Now we have to see the boxing match between you and Brad Shepard. You know,
look at you. You're over here just always trying to get boxing matches between people. You got KSI and Miz or whatever. You're just over here. You just want to see people box.
Anyone can get it, right? Do you want to box? We can box.
No, I told you, dude. That's why I didn't want to be a wrestler. I'm not big like you.
Yeah, but like it's not wrestling, it's boxing. It's different.
It's not wrestling, it's boxing where you're punching each other in the face. It's totally different.
Yeah, it's not forearms. Now it's like real fists.
Gloves.
Yeah, it's gloves. It's like a pillow. Like it can work. I guess fine. We won't do the boxing match. Maybe we can do like a puzzle or something. That work better?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll do.
All right, cool.
Do a
puzzle it is. Together. I'll send it over to you. We'll figure it out. But jumping out like the hot takes and going back to some more like wrestling stuff. Obviously, you were on WWE Backstage, and that was like a huge show. A lot of people liked it, and then the big reveal, CM Punk showing up on that show. What was like the story of like that day for you? Like knowing that like, oh, CM Punk's just back in WWE, kind of.
Pass.
Gotcha.
I'm a pass.
All right. Cool. Next. Sounds like another boxing match. But
I mean, for me, all I'll say is for me, I didn't even know he was going to be there. I didn't know he was going to be there. Yeah. I finished my segment and they were like, hey, Ryan, you're needed in the control room. And I was like, why? I'm not usually needed in the control room for anything. Yeah. And they were like, well, can you just come to the control room? And I was like, okay. And then I went in the control room. I was like, am I in trouble? Did I say something bad on TV? Like, did I do something? And they were like, oh, no. Can you go in the green room? And I was like, okay. Thought you guys wanted me here in the control room. They're like, well, no, could you just go to the green room? And I was like, okay. Then I go over to the green room. Mick Foley was sitting there eating a sandwich. And then I was just like standing there watching the TV, and then Punk gets brought out. And I just remember Mick Foley eating his sandwich, and he goes, CM Punk's back. And then goes back to his sandwich, and that was that. So yeah.
Oh wow, what a story. But I guess going into like what led to like Backstage leading into now like the podcast?
I mean, really, like when I was at Backstage and I got a taste of Fox, I was like, man, this is really what I've been wanting to do. You know, I had this detour with Pro Wrestling Sheet after TMZ, and I was really proud of what I had done with it to a certain degree. But I really felt like one of my strengths was always like going to a mainstream place and helping their wrestling coverage in a professional manner, and you know, giving them lots of content that they can know is not crappy content, basically. And so when I was at Fox, I really wanted to come to I really wanted to come to Fox Sports. When I was at Pro Wrestling Sheet, I really wanted to come to Fox Sports while I was doing WWE Backstage. A lot of things there. I started talking to people there, but then the pandemic hit and it prolonged things. And I, for a minute, thought I wasn't even going to get the job. But then things came back around. I was able to get the job I wanted. And when I started at Fox, there was no like blueprint of like, hey, we're hiring you to a podcast, or like, we're hiring you to do this. It was like, we're hiring you, figure out what you're going to do, And I was like, all right. Cause I write stuff. So I was writing, I was doing stuff and doing the interviews that were like 15, 20 minutes or whatever. And that's when I was like, let's just do a podcast, like, let's do a weekly show that's like a podcast. And it took some convincing and stuff, but it's why I say, like, I really do think that you have to believe in yourself and you have to always be pushing for things that you care about. I think that, as cynical as it is to say, like, no one cares about, like, no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to be pushing for you. No one's going to be, editing your stuff. No one's going to be writing better stuff for you. Like, you got to do your stuff, if you have a passion and you believe in yourself in that passion, you just got to do it. You just got to go for it. And mine was really like, I had been listening to all these podcasts. I had done the news thing for so long. I had done the analyst thing for so long. But the whole time I was doing Pro Wrestling Sheet and I was writing up stories, I would read these interviews and I'd be like I just said, this is the questions that you're asking. Like, these questions are awful. Like, this is the content you're giving me to cover your show. Like I told you when we met, write press releases, send them out. You'll get news coverage on these websites. And I truly believe that. But a lot of the content they were sending me sucked, And so I was like, if someone gives me the opportunity, I'm going to ask way better questions than all these other people. And so when I saw like that avenue of like, oh crap, I might actually be able to finally do this thing that in my mind I've said I'd be good at for like years now. Well, time to like put your money where your mouth is. And so I just did it, and I read books when I started at Fox. When they gave me the position, I've read a book on like being a better interviewer because I didn't like the first few episodes of the show. Felt like I was just asking questions rather than having a conversation. And then I just tried to grow from there. But really, like, it's just pushing. It's just pushing. Like, it's kind of like I told you, like, you just got to make stuff happen, like no one's going to make stuff happen for you. So you just got to take stuff into your own hands and just make it happen.
For sure. I guess like you kind of answered the question, but I still kind of want to ask it as well. How does someone go from like just starting out and like trying to grow in wrestling media to the point where maybe they're not like talking to WWE or anything like that, but like they're just growing to a point where they have like an audience and they have like a platform where they can invite these wrestlers on and talk about whatever they're trying to promote that day or just have a conversation with them?
I think ultimately it's kind of like I was saying, like a hustle. Like, you just got to hustle. Like, if you look at the wrestling industry, right? Like, it's very much as like a lot of the same people stay at the top. It's very much an industry that's always evolving. If you look at who's near the top of the wrestling industry right now, compared to where they were 4 years ago, let's say, right? 3 years ago, we'll say 4. Pandemic kind of messed things up a little bit. Prior to the pandemic, you look at where they were though, and they were attainable people. Like, these were all people that you could reach out to, that you could say, hey, I want to interview you. And they'd be like, cool, like, let's do it. Now, a little more difficult because they're on TV every week. They're these crazy schedules, right? But I do think that relationships at the end of the day are like how you're going to move up or how you're going to, accomplish things. When I started at TMZ, someone else, when I wanted to do wrestling stories at TMZ, I should say that, not when I started, but when I wanted to start doing wrestling stories, there was somebody else who had the WWE contact for their PR department. He was trying to do wrestling stories. And I'm not trying to say you should like backstab people, but he wasn't a wrestling fan. And I was like, well, let me talk to them. And, because of that, I've fostered that relationship for I think like 10 years now, and it started off as me just calling them and being like, hey, I want to do more stuff. You just got to like call people and talk to them and just like make more relationships, and hustle. I think ultimately at the end of the day, if you're doing interviews and you're not making clips for TikTok, for Instagram, for YouTube Shorts, you're failing. Like, you're failing. I think that Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever, like, I know people make fun of him or whatever, but like, he's right in terms of like, if you repurpose your content, like more people are going to see it. It'll connect to more people. Like the TikTok algorithm is so smart. It'll show people your content if you're making content that connects with them. So I think that like, those are the two things of like repurposing your content to make sure you're not just doing it. You can't just do an interview, put it up on YouTube or put it up in a podcast and then like call it a day. There's so much work that goes into it after if you want to move up in stature in the industry. You got to cut clips. You got to be on all social media. You got to send out press releases. Like all the names of people that you see popping right now, all did that. All of them. Denise is who I took it from. I took it from Denise Salcedo. When I was at AfterBuzz, she was sending out press releases from the shows that she was working on. She wasn't even on the show. She was an intern behind the scenes. And I would get these press releases from her that were really good. And I went, damn, when I do interviews, I have to do this now. Crap, and it worked, like it worked. Same thing with TMZ. Like people don't even realize TMZ, they send out a press release for every story exclusive, every exclusive they put out, press release to hundreds, if not thousands of publications being like, here's a news story, because more people will pick it up. Like everyone does that. So press releases, because the people who you send these press releases to, they don't know how famous you are and they don't care how famous you are. They don't care what kind of following you have. All they care is they're going to get some clicks out of it. It's a click-based internet these days. If you're going to get someone clicks, they're going to help you. So press releases, cutting clips,
gotcha,
relationships.
Gotcha. And I guess like the last question, Ryan, is who's your Mount Rushmore? I'm kidding. What's like your goals in wrestling right now?
My goal in wrestling right now would probably be, I got a couple of them. I want to get the show, as much as I like the show, it's not the most downloaded show on the, in podcasts for wrestling. So I'd like to get it higher up the charts, trying to figure out what I need to do in order to make that happen. But beyond that, beyond just my show, I really want to be part of like another backstage type show. I'm at Fox Sports and I see, all these sports coverage shows. And I really think wrestling needs something like that right now. I really do. There's no plans. I haven't pitched it to anyone or anything, but like, I've felt like an interview, not an interview show, a panel show where people are, for lack of a better word, arguing about sports. Like wrestling would be interesting. Like a show like Skip and Shannon, where two guys are arguing with each other about the product, that have well thought out opinions on it, I do think would be interesting, or more, or whatever. So that's, I would like, in a perfect world, to one day make that happen. Because like I said, TV has always been something that, has been there for me. But I love everything I'm doing on digital. Fox Sports Digital is awesome. I'm so happy with my show. Like the fact that I have my own show is like a dream come true from when I was a kid. So I'm always thinking of the future and other goals and stuff like that. So I have a million in my head, but that's probably one of the ones I think about the most, of like, I think the fan base would like something like that, even if it was just online. It's not like it has to be on TV. I'd like to see that.
Of course, man. And like, man, this will probably wrap it up right here. Dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been like, I only known you for a few months now, but like, it's been a great time just getting to know you and everything that we talked about today. Apparently you really hate Mount Rushmore. I don't know what you have against the Dakotas of the United States, but that's but yeah, hopefully we can train and get in that boxing ring eventually and we can throw down and see what happens. But yeah, dude.
Yes, no, I appreciate you having me on here, dude. And I really do try to support the people that I feel are working hard to come up in the industry. I really do try to support it. And I like seeing you hustle. Like, I think that a lot of times I'm surprised that people don't ask me for advice. And when you did, sometimes like I'll give someone like a real basic answer, but I could tell when I gave you the basic answer that you were wanting more. And yeah. So I respected that. I was like, oh, this guy's not only actually wanting the advice. You went and did the thing that the advice I gave you, you immediately implemented it. And I was like, well, I respect this guy now. So I enjoy seeing your hustle. Keep it up, dude.
Thank you, man. And like, I'm gonna go watch Ryan Satin on Out of Character now, guys. You guys should too. Catch it on WWE Fox, dude. It's amazing. Thank you for coming on, guys. Make sure to subscribe. We're out.